There are moments when the air seems to change, the silence becomes denser, and the heart begins to hear a voice that doesn't come from this world. A subtle vibration touches the spirit, as if an ancient presence were silently approaching. It is at this exact point that Chico Xavier used to say the soul awakens, not by chance but out of necessity. Awakening never happens in comfort. It arrives as a gentle and inevitable call, a reminder of the invisible that insists on finding us even when we pretend not to notice. Have you ever felt this? A sudden sensation that something is watching you tenderly, that there is a hidden purpose behind the ordinary. This presence, this silent murmur, is the beginning of the spiritual journey. Chico lived his entire life between two worlds. He walked on earth, but breathed the air of heaven. His gaze seemed to see beyond the walls of matter. He said that the human spirit is a forgotten star, and that pain, love, and time are merely instruments to rekindle that inner light. When he spoke, it wasn't just a voice. It was a vibration that pierced the chest and touched places we didn't even know existed. Chico didn't preach fear of death, but the beauty of return. For him, dying wasn't disappearing, it was awakening. And that's exactly what begins to happen when we feel something within us changing for no apparent reason. Many confuse this awakening with melancholy or loneliness, but what seems empty is, in fact, the echo of the soul calling the spirit back home. When the world loses its flavor, when the brilliance of things fades and the goals that once seemed urgent no longer have meaning, it is a sign that consciousness is crossing an invisible frontier. Chico said that this is the first symptom of the reunion with the eternal, the feeling of being outside of time, of no longer fitting into one's own skin. It is the spirit remembering that material life is only one of the rooms in a much larger temple. At this stage, everything around seems the same, but something inside begins to vibrate differently. It's a kind of nameless longing, a memory of a place where the body has never been, but the heart recognizes. The soul knows it is being called. And that's when fear tries to infiltrate. Human beings fear the invisible, fear the sacred, fear what they cannot control. But Chico taught that the fear of death is, in fact, the fear of truth itself, because death doesn't destroy, it only reveals. It reveals what we always were, but forgot because of the noise of matter. How many times have you felt something you couldn't explain? A shiver when thinking about someone, and then that person calls you right after? A dream about a loved one who has passed away that seemed more real than waking life, or a moment of profound calm for no apparent reason, as if someone were enveloping you in light. These are the small signs, the subtle touches that announce that the spirit is moving. Chico perceived these signs as prayers answered before they were even uttered. He said that the spiritual plane doesn't need words. It responds in vibration, in coincidences, in encounters, in sensations. Spiritual life is constant, even if the body pretends not to see it. And when it begins to manifest intensely, the physical world seems to shrink. Worries lose weight, ambitions become less urgent, and a kind of silent clarity is born. Chico used to write that true awakening is when the spirit remembers eternity while the body still breathes. This is the greatest gift a being can receive, the awareness of being alive and at the same time, eternal. It is a rare state. And that is exactly what begins to happen to you when you feel that something has changed without logical explanation. But this awakening doesn't come without a cost. It disrupts what was dormant. Thoughts that were once solid crumble, beliefs weaken, bonds are tested. What no longer vibrates with truth begins to fall. It's the natural movement of the soul clearing the path for the new. Chico lived this in silence, enduring pain, losses, and defamation, but without complaining. He said that each difficulty was a form of polishing. Pain is God's file, he affirmed. It removes what is excess, what is pride, what is fear. And that's how the spirit prepares itself to understand the mysteries that previously seemed unattainable. During his nightly prayers, Chico described seeing rows of luminous spirits observing the earth, not with pity, but with patience. Spirits who have already experienced the same uncertainties, who have known the anguish of the flesh and the forgetfulness of the spirit. They wait for us silently until the vibration of our soul rises enough to recognize them, and when that happens, their presence becomes almost physical. You feel the touch of an inexplicable tenderness, a comfort that comes without words. It is the universe confirming that life never ceases. Chico explained that the first sign of spiritual readiness is this inner recognition that there is more than meets the eye. It is the moment when faith ceases to be belief and becomes evidence. The soul then begins to perceive the intertwining of worlds. Dream and wakefulness become confused. Intuition intensifies. Synchronicity multiplies. The spirit, in its learning, begins to emerge from the state of collective sleep. Awakening, Chico said, is seeing the invisible with the eyes of the heart. At this point, spiritual messages begin to emerge in unexpected ways. A passage from a book, a song, a sudden memory, a phrase overheard by chance. The universe begins to speak in symbolic language. It's as if the spiritual plane were saying, "We are here, and you are beginning to remember." The awakening of the soul is always accompanied by external signs, but also by an internal upheaval. The old identity begins to crumble. You feel that something greater wants to be born within you, but you don't know what. Chico described this state as the labor of the soul. It hurts, but it is sacred. It is the soul returning to breathe the air of eternity. When this process begins, solitude changes its meaning. It is no longer absence, but withdrawal. The silence, once uncomfortable, becomes presence. The heart, once scattered, becomes a compass. Prayer ceases to be a plea and becomes a dialogue. And even if no answer is heard, there is a profound certainty that someone is listening. Chico said that true prayer does not ask. It recognizes. It recognizes the hidden harmony behind the pain, the wisdom concealed in every loss, the invisible love that sustains all things. And then, one day, perception changes completely. You no longer seek proof that there is something beyond. You feel it. You feel it like breathing. You feel that there is life in everything, that the entire universe is a conscious expression of something greater. It is in this state that the spirit begins to prepare itself to understand the mystery of transition. Chico taught that no one dies suddenly. The soul begins to rehearse its liberation long before the last breath. And this rehearsal begins here, when you realize that material life is not everything, when your gaze turns inward, when the sacred becomes familiar. Now take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen to your heart beating. This isn't just flesh pulsing. It's the sacred drum of your eternity reminding you that time cannot destroy you. Chico said that in this sound dwells the voice of God. If you listen carefully, you will realize that there is an invisible rhythm guiding everything, an ancient music that has accompanied you since before birth. This is the sign. It is the beginning of remembrance. And if you've come this far, know that you're not alone. The same breath that moved Chico to write, to console, and to serve is the same that touches you now. This presence is not distant. It is there, all around you, silent, loving, watching, and if you allow it, it will guide you through the next signs, revealing step by step the path that leads to the true dwelling place of the soul. But before that happens, something even deeper needs to be revealed. There is a secret hidden in dreams, portals between matter and infinity, and it is through them that the spirit sometimes begins to understand that it has never been separated from the one it loves. This will be the first of the great signs. There are nights when sleep arrives like a portal, and what seemed like simple rest transforms into a silent journey. It is in this instant, between the resting body and the awakening soul, that many perceive the first sign of the spiritual world. Chico Xavier used to say that sleep is the rehearsal for eternity, and that while the body sleeps, the spirit takes the opportunity to visit places and reunite with beings that the waking mind is unable to conceive. He believed that true dreams are not creations of the brain, but messages sent by loving intelligences that accompany our journey. And that is why sometimes what we call a dream is truly a reunion. Perhaps you've experienced this before. You went to sleep exhausted, expecting nothing, and suddenly found yourself facing someone who had passed away. The face is the same, the gaze is tender, the touch is real. You wake up with a peaceful heart and a feeling of presence that accompanies you throughout the day. It's as if love had crossed the invisible border just to say, "I am well, and you will be too." Chico Buarque recounted receiving countless letters from people describing such experiences, and he would respond with the serenity of someone who knew the truth. The bonds that love builds are stronger than death. For him, these nocturnal encounters are not mere memories but real visits, moments in which the spirit partially frees itself from matter and reunites with those who await it on the other side. But how to distinguish an ordinary dream from a spiritual visit? Chico said there is a subtle, yet unmistakable difference. An ordinary dream dissolves with time, loses color, fades from memory. A spiritual visit, however, remains vivid, clear, recorded with details that the brain could never invent. The scent of the perfume, the sound of the voice, the emotion that needs an embrace. We wake up and still feel the warmth of the presence, the certainty that it wasn't imagination. This type of experience doesn't need rational explanation, because the heart recognizes it before the mind understands. It's an encounter of souls, and it leaves marks of light. Many people try to describe this phenomenon, but words always seem insufficient. A mother who dreams of her deceased son and wakes up feeling her pillow damp with tears. A husband who talks to his wife in a dream and wakes up with her perfume on his clothes. A son who hears his father smiling from across the room. Chico said that these accounts are true dialogues between dimensions, and that the spiritual plane takes advantage of the moment of sleep, because that is when the noise of the world falls silent and the spirit can hear again. Sleep is the moment when the soul escapes the prisons of the flesh and remembers who it truly is. Chico once recounted that, after the death of a close friend, he dreamed of him in a vast field covered in soft light. His friend walked smiling and simply said, "Tell everyone that we are more alive than ever." Upon waking, Chico understood that this phrase was a message to the world, a reminder that death does not erase consciousness, it only changes its frequency. He began to repeat this in his lectures, with the serenity of someone who had already crossed the boundary between planes. The spirit never dies, it only changes form. How many times, amidst your routine, do you feel a memory insist on returning? A face appears in your mind, a song plays, a butterfly lands exactly where that person used to be. Coincidence? Chico said no. These small daily signs are extensions of the same communication that happens during sleep. The spiritual plane speaks to us all the time, in dreams and while awake, but almost no one listens because we are too distracted by the noise of the world. What we call chance is often a spiritual touch disguised as everyday life. Imagine that, as you sleep, your soul gently detaches from your body, like a leaf carried by the wind. It floats, guided by forces that know it better than it knows itself. Along the way, you encounter landscapes that seem made of vibration and light. You are greeted by beings who radiate tenderness without words, only vibration. At some point, that beloved face appears, and the feeling is of home, of reunion, of truth. You converse, but not with your mouth. The communication is direct, thought to thought. When you awaken, logic tries to deny what you felt, but the heart insists. It was real. Chico explained that during sleep, the spirit not only sees those it loves again, but also receives guidance and comfort. Sometimes we wake up with a new idea, a sudden strength, a peace that didn't exist before. It's the result of a dialogue that the material consciousness forgot, but the spirit remembers. Some wake up crying without knowing why. Others feel a longing they can't name. Chico said these are the effects of the reunion, the echo of the soul remembering the embrace it just experienced on the invisible plane. He himself often woke up in tears, overcome by an emotion he couldn't describe. In one of his letters he wrote, "There are nights when the body sleeps but the heart travels, and when it returns, it brings in its silence the memory of heaven." This phrase summarizes the mystery of the first sign, the soul recognizing that it belongs to two worlds at the same time. But what happens when we ignore these signs? Chico explained that the spirit that does not heed the calls of the invisible remains trapped in the noise of matter and therefore fears death. Fear is born from separation. When we believe we are only body, the disappearance of the flesh seems like the end. When we realize that we are spirit, we understand that death is merely a change of state. He said that most people awaken only at the moment of departure, when the body finally falls silent. However, a few, those who begin to feel these subtle touches while still alive, receive a rare gift, conscious awakening. This is what he called an advanced remembrance of eternity. For decades, Chico lived with this intertwining of planes. He worked all day, but at night he received messages, psychographies, consolations, guidance. He slept little because his soul rarely rested. He said that true fatigue is not physical, it is spiritual, and that real rest comes when the spirit reconciles with love. For him, each dream, each intuition, Each shiver was part of an invisible dialogue between heaven and earth. Perhaps at this very moment someone you love is trying to tell you something. Perhaps a dream that marked you years ago was a visit and not a delusion. Perhaps that sudden thought of gratitude that makes you cry for no reason is a spiritual memory disguised as emotion. Chico taught that the soul never forgets the bonds of love. It only covers them with the veil of matter. But love is stubborn. It always finds a way to manifest itself, even between dimensions. There is a point where the mystery becomes so intimate that it ceases to be a mystery. The soul understands without needing to comprehend. The heart accepts before the mind formulates explanations. It is in this state that true faith is born, not the kind that depends on dogmas, but the kind that arises from direct experience with the invisible. Chico believed that this type of faith is the first step in spiritual preparation. Whoever truly loves has already begun to conquer death, he said, because love is the vibration that unites all planes of existence. When these signs begin to become frequent, it's not a coincidence. It's guidance. It's the spirit beginning to remember its eternal nature. It's the soul preparing for a new level of consciousness. And when this process intensifies, material life also begins to change. Small irritations lose importance. Priorities are reversed. Forgiveness becomes easier. Something invisible begins to reorganize the inner self, preparing the ground for what comes next. Chico explained that the awakening of the soul is always accompanied by practical transformation. The human being becomes more compassionate, calmer, more lucid. He stops chasing after the world and begins to walk alongside it. But there's something more, a secret that Chico used to mention in a low voice, as if speaking of a mystery that cannot be put into words. He said that when the soul begins to dream of the dead, it is not merely remembering the past, it is being called. The dream is the invitation, and whoever accepts it, even without realizing it, begins to prepare for something greater. It doesn't always mean imminent death, but it always indicates a spiritual birth. It is the beginning of the full remembrance of who you truly are. And perhaps, as you close your eyes tonight, the same portal will open for you. Perhaps someone will be waiting for you with the same smile they always had to say again, "I am well, do not fear." When that happens, do not doubt, just feel. And upon waking, remember Chico's words, "Love is the bridge between worlds. It never sleeps." There's a moment in the spiritual journey when the world seems to lose the artificial shine that always enchanted you. Things are still there. The same streets, the same objects, the same voices, but something inside you changes frequency. It's as if the heart has learned a new language, and suddenly, nothing that was urgent seems to matter. Chico Xavier said that this is the second sign of awakening, detachment. It's not escape, nor denial. It's lucidity. When the spirit begins to understand that the true value of things is not in what can be touched, but in what can be felt, the game of existence changes completely. The desire to possess is replaced by the will to understand. The impulse to accumulate transforms into the desire to serve, and it is at this point that the soul begins to be freed. Most people believe that detachment is a forced renunciation, a gesture of someone who has lost or given up. Chico saw it differently. For him, detachment is a silent conquest of the mature soul. It is the moment when the spirit, tired of the illusions of possession, learns that nothing is truly its own. Not the body, not affections, not titles, not time. Everything we call mine is merely a sacred loan. And when this understanding settles in, something extraordinary happens. Fear begins to disappear. The fear of losing, the fear of not being, the fear of not having. Because whoever understands impermanence discovers the indestructible. But what happens when the soul is freed from the weight of matter? It begins to float through existence with a lightness that the world doesn't understand. Others call it distracted, detached, distant, but in truth it is simply aligned with what is eternal. Chico used to say that true detachment is not the absence of love, but purified love. Love without demands, without expectations, without fear of ending. Love that needs to hold on to exist is still fear disguised as affection, he would say. When the soul loves without wanting to possess, it approaches the vibration of free spirits. Have you ever noticed how, after a great loss, something awakens within you? As if a voice were saying, "Now see what truly matters." It is at this moment that detachment reveals itself as an initiation. The pain, which seemed like punishment, is actually a demanding teacher. It teaches what comfort never could, the difference between the essential and the fleeting. And, ironically, it is when we lose that we begin to gain. We lose the superfluous and find the essence. What if what you call loss is actually liberation? What if that broken relationship, that job that ended, that crumbling security are just signs that the spirit is releasing what has already served its purpose? Chico said that life has a perfect pedagogy, even when it seems cruel. Everything that disappears makes room for something new. The soul, in its evolutionary process, needs to detach itself from its own attachments, including the pains it insists on carrying. Over time, detachment matures and gives way to a peace that is independent of circumstances. It is the serenity that comes when the heart finally understands that everything that comes to teach, and everything that goes because it has already taught. This peace is not spiritual laziness, nor giving up on life. It is the recognition that there is no separation between what happens and what should happen. Chico said that peace is the perfume of a soul that has learned to trust. Now imagine yourself surrounded by the things you love most, the people, the objects, the memories. What if the universe asked you to let them go for a moment? Would you be able to? Not as a painful renunciation, but with a deep trust that everything that is true returns in a higher form. Detachment doesn't require loss. It requires faith. Faith that nothing that belongs to love is truly lost. But something unexpected happens when this peace begins to blossom. Life, which previously seemed like a series of battles, transforms into a field of meaning. Difficult situations cease to be punishments and become messages. Each conflict reveals itself like a mirror. Chico saw suffering as a sacred language. All pain has a spiritual function. It is the way heaven finds to remind man how strong he is. And it is in this understanding that the third sign is born, inner peace. This peace is different from ordinary calm. It's not the absence of noise, but conscious silence amidst the noise. It's the serenity that comes not because everything went right, but because you understood that you no longer need to control everything. Chico experienced this many times. He faced unjust accusations, illnesses, sleepless nights, and yet he never rebelled. His peace was not weakness, it was disciplined strength. It was faith that knew how to wait for God's timing. Have you ever felt a peace you can't explain? A calmness that arises for no reason, precisely when things are most difficult? That is the soul in harmony with its own destiny. It is the spirit recognizing that there are no tragedies when viewed from the perspective of eternity. This serenity is not acquired in books or temples. It is born the moment you understand that every pain has served its purpose, and that ultimately, nothing happened in vain. What if the peace you seek isn't in solving problems but in accepting them? What if fulfillment doesn't come from control, but from surrender? Chico said that the greatest human mistake is trying to understand God before trusting Him. Understanding comes after surrender, not before. Only those who trust find rest, and only those who find rest can hear what the Spirit is trying to say. Over time, this peace becomes a presence. It doesn't depend on meditation or isolation. It walks with you in small actions, simple conversations, and everyday decisions. It is discreet yet transformative. When the Spirit enters this state, the energy changes. The gaze becomes gentler, the voice calmer, the gestures lighter. People approach without understanding why, because they feel the different vibration. Chico called this the light that cannot be lit with hands. It is the light that springs naturally from the soul that has reconciled with life. This peace does not mean the absence of emotions, but mastery over them. It is the point at which the spirit ceases to be a hostage to circumstances. Suffering may arrive, but it no longer finds a home. Anger arises, but does not take root. Guilt appears, but dissolves into understanding. The human being who reaches this state is not a saint, but awakened. He lives in the world without getting lost in it. He feels without drowning. But there is a secret that Chico used to reveal only in moments of great confidence. True peace is not static. It pulsates. It expands and contracts as the soul learns. There are days when it seems to disappear, and on those days the spirit is invited to look deeper. The temporary absence of peace is not a fall. It is purification. It is the soul being purified in the fire of trials to learn to sustain the state it wishes to achieve. Have you ever wondered why, even after feeling peace, it sometimes disappears? Chico said it's because the soul needs to consolidate each stage of enlightenment. Peace that comes easily, goes easily. Peace gained through experience becomes permanent, and for that, the universe tests the steadfastness of the awakened heart. When this awareness matures, the spirit begins to perceive that everything, absolutely everything, works together for good. Suffering that seemed pointless reveals itself as initiation. Loss that seemed unjust shows itself as liberation. God's silence reveals itself as an answer, and peace transforms into wisdom. It is the point at which the spirit begins to act guided by a silent certainty. Nothing is by chance. Chico Xavier called this stage the serenity of those who have accomplished their task. He said that the greatest reward for the spirit is not heaven itself, but the tranquility of one who knows they did their best, even amidst failings. The spirit that understands this no longer judges itself. It does not seek perfection, it seeks awareness. And when it finds it, life is transformed into prayer. What if this serenity were the true miracle? What if the greatest sign of evolution wasn't in gifts, visions, or healings, but in the simple ability to maintain peace in the face of chaos? Chico believed that this is the sign of a spirit in harmony with universal laws, the mark of someone who has already learned Earth's lesson. At this point, the human being no longer needs to defend themselves from life. They trust. The same pain that once broke them now educates them. The same fear that paralyzed them now awakens them. And the soul, free from the shackles of matter, begins to glimpse what comes next. Chico said that it is at this moment that heaven draws closer, because it finds space to dwell. The serene heart becomes a dwelling place of light, and so between detachment and peace the spirit rises. But this elevation does not distance it from the world. On the contrary, it makes it more human. True transcendence, Chico said, is descending into the hearts of others with the wisdom learned in silence. And it is precisely in this simplicity that the mystery is revealed. The soul that has freed itself from matter begins to teach without words, heal without touching, and illuminate without realizing it. And then something even deeper begins to form on the horizon of consciousness, a phenomenon that defies time and allows the spirit to glimpse the infinite. What was faith transforms into vision. What was prayer transforms into communion. And that is how the next sign is announced, when the awakened soul realizes that it no longer lives only in this world. There are moments when the soul begins to cross invisible boundaries and the real blends with the impossible. The world seems the same, but the air vibrates differently, and small events begin to defy logic. Coincidences repeat themselves. Thoughts materialize. Answers arrive before the question. It's as if the universe begins to respond in real time. Chico Xavier said that this is the fourth sign of awakening, the expansion of consciousness. He described this phase as a period in which the spirit begins to perceive that everything around it is alive, intelligent, and connected by a network of energy that escapes human comprehension. Chance, he said, is merely the name we give to the invisible movement of divine will. Chico experienced this so intensely that he often witnessed events impossible to explain. Once, during a psychography session in Uberaba, he wrote a long message, signed by a recently deceased young man. In the middle of the text, the young man described an accident he had been involved in and mentioned a small detail, the number of a bus that no one had disclosed. Hours later, the family confirmed the information with tears in their eyes. This was more than mediumship. It was the universe manifesting itself through a mind no longer confined to matter. Chico's consciousness functioned as a bridge between dimensions. He said that we all possess this same capacity, but we live anesthetized by distractions. When the soul awakens, the subtle senses begin to work, and the world ceases to be merely visible. It becomes symbolic. Perhaps you've already experienced something like this. Thinking of someone and receiving a message from them seconds later. Dreaming of a place and visiting it days later. Imagining a scene and seeing it unfold before your eyes. These phenomena, which science calls coincidence and which the ancients called signs, are the way the spirit teaches us to see beyond the surface. Chico Xavier claimed that synchronicities are reminders that destiny is not a straight line, but a living web. He said that God speaks in code, and this code manifests itself through repetitions, numbers, encounters, words, symbols. The problem is that few are attentive enough to decipher them. When the soul awakens, life becomes language, and every common gesture gains mystical depth. But what really happens when this consciousness expands? Perception changes. Time begins to behave strangely. Entire days seem to fit into minutes, and minutes stretch out as if they were eternal. You can look at the clock and realize that time no longer obeys the usual sequence. Chico Xavier spoke of this simply. Time is just a fabric that the spirit uses to learn patience. He believed that the spirit that detaches itself from the temporal illusion begins to touch eternity, not as a concept, but as a direct experience. In this state, the soul feels the present as if it were infinite. The past and the future cease to be separate places and become vibrations coexisting in the now. Once during a conversation with friends, Chico Xavier recounted that while psychographing, he felt outside of time. Minutes seemed like seconds. When he returned to ordinary consciousness, he realized that hours had passed. This sensation was not a hallucination, but an indication that the human mind can access simultaneous realities. He said that in the spiritual plane, time is elastic, shaped by intention. To think of someone is to be with them. To desire something is to bring it closer. And the most curious thing is that the purer the feeling, the faster the return. That is why thoughts of love, prayer, and gratitude create real and almost immediate effects. In contrast, dense feelings linger because they belong to the slow time of matter. Have you ever experienced something similar? A moment so intense it felt like an eternity? A hug that made you forget about time? A conversation that passed in seconds but remained etched in your memory for years? Chico said that these moments are glimpses of eternity. They are instants when the spirit breathes outside the prison of chronology. He believed that eternity is not a future destination, but a presence that reveals itself when we stop measuring life in hours and begin to feel it in depth. When the soul reaches this point, the fear of death begins to disappear, because the spirit realizes that death is merely a change of vibration within the same field of consciousness. There are curious accounts that confirm this perception. In several mediumistic sessions, Chico Xavier psychographed messages from people who described time in the spiritual plane as something completely different. One young woman wrote, "Here time doesn't pass, it flourishes." Another spirit explained, "Yesterday and tomorrow are just movements of the same ray of light." These messages seemed poetic, but they contained profound wisdom. They suggest that time, as we understand it, is an invention of human perception, created to organize experience on Earth. When the soul frees itself from this filter, it begins to live simultaneously. Past, present, and future become faces of the same truth. But what does this change in practical life? It changes everything. When you realize that time is merely a reflection of consciousness, you begin to live more serenely. The rush dissolves. Anxieties lose power. Guilt, which lives in the past, weakens. Fear, which feeds on the future, disappears. The awakened spirit learns to be fully present in the moment, and it is in this state that the greatest transformations occur. Chico lived like this. Every word, every gesture, every look was filled with presence. He treated each person as if they were the only one in the world. He said that the secret to fulfillment is not doing a lot, but being fully present in what you do. Have you ever noticed how some people always seem to be on time, as if everything conspires in their favor? Chico said this happens when the spirit aligns with the divine frequency. When the intention is pure, the universe organizes the circumstances. He called this soul attunement. In this state, life seems guided by an invisible intelligence. Improbable situations occur, doors open at the exact moment, and the path reveals itself step by step. What is a miracle to the world is coherence to the awakened spirit. He knew that every coincidence is, in fact, a confirmation of God's presence. An impressive event occurred with him in 1958. During a collective prayer, Chico interrupted the reading and calmly said, "A spirit of light has just been born in Sao Paulo. He will change the course of spiritual medicine." Years later, doctors studying Chico's psychographed letters reported that on that exact date and time, a boy had been born who, decades later, would found an institute for the study of consciousness and dedicate his life to the integration of science and spirituality. Coincidence, perhaps, but Chico said that the future, in certain cases, is merely the present seen from a higher plane. Those who live in harmony with the eternal anticipate time. What if time were simply a way for love to reveal itself in stages? What if yesterday and tomorrow were just two sides of the same eternity? Chico believed this. He said that Love is the substance that keeps the universe in balance, and time is merely the movement of that love. This vision completely changes the way we live, because if everything is a manifestation of a greater will, then nothing happens outside of that plan, not even chaos. It's curious to note that experiences similar to Chico's have been reported by mystics from various traditions: Buddhist monks, Sufis, Christian saints, indigenous shamans. All describe moments when time disappears and the self merges with something greater. The difference is that Chico experienced this without withdrawing from ordinary life. He continued attending to people, writing letters, working in silence. This is perhaps the most powerful lesson. It's not necessary to withdraw from the world to experience eternity. Eternity reveals itself in the midst of routine, in the instant we wash the dishes. Listen to someone. Take a deep breath. What changes is not what we do, but the awareness with which we do it. There's a little-known story about Chico. During a trip to Minas Gerais, he was walking alongside a group when suddenly he stopped and looked at the horizon. He remained motionless for a few seconds, as if listening to something in the distance. One of his friends asked what had happened. Chico replied, "Time opened up. I saw a piece of tomorrow." Minutes later, the group received news that a family they intended to visit had been in an accident. At Chico's insistence, they changed their route, avoided the road, and unknowingly escaped a tragedy. He never spoke of this with pride. He would only say that God speaks to everyone, but few listen in time. These accounts are not intended to turn Chico into a myth, but to show what happens when the soul reaches the highest degree of attunement with the divine. He was not a supernatural being. He was someone who learned to live between two worlds, the world of the flesh and the world of the spirit, with the same naturalness with which he breathed. This capacity lies dormant in all of us. Awakening it is a matter of listening. What if at this moment you were being invited to perceive the signs around you? What if every coincidence, every sudden sensation, every premonition was a message from a higher plane trying to remind you that life is much broader than what you see? Chico said that when we begin to observe, the spiritual world begins to respond. The expansion of consciousness is a silent but constant dialogue. Ultimately, the fourth sign is not about seeing the invisible, but about becoming part of it. When the spirit awakens and time dissolves, existence takes on a new texture. Things cease to happen by chance and begin to happen with purpose. And it is in this state that the soul begins to perceive the fifth sign, the instant when time ceases to divide and begins to reveal the eternal present. Sometimes the awakened soul begins to feel a longing that cannot be contained within the world. It is not longing for someone or a time, but for something the mind cannot name. It is an ancient memory that comes without images, a call that vibrates in the chest like an echo from infinity. Chico Xavier said that this feeling is the sixth sign of spiritual preparation, the longing for the eternal home. The soul begins to remember, even in fragments, the luminous dimension from which it came. And that is why, in certain moments of silence, the human being feels the longing for a place they have never visited in this life. The spirit recognizes itself as a stranger on earth and, for the first time, understands that the true home is not made of walls, but of light. This longing can arise in simple situations. During a sunset, while listening to an old song, looking at someone's face and feeling, without knowing why, that you've known them for centuries. The heart expands and time seems to stop. It's as if the soul, for a brief instant, crosses the curtain between worlds and breathes the air of the spiritual plane. Chico said that the spirit, as it matures, experiences small anticipations of eternity. These glimpses are divine gifts, intervals of remembrance in the necessary forgetfulness of physical life, and it is in these moments that the soul understands it is only passing through. The longing for home is the most tender, and at the same time the most powerful call that exists, because it is born from the memory of God within us. But along with this memory comes conflict. The spirit that remembers the infinite is still bound to the flesh. The body wants to remain, but the soul wants to ascend. Human consciousness becomes a battlefield between attachment and transcendence. Chico experienced this intensely. In moments of profound spiritual connection, he felt the desire to remain on the subtle plane, but duty called him back. He said that longing for heaven is proof that we have already touched the light, but that true love is choosing to remain to serve. This choice defines the evolving spirit, not the one that seeks to escape the world, but the one that learns to illuminate the world from within. Have you ever felt an inexplicable nostalgia, a serene emptiness, a desire to cry without sadness? Perhaps this is the same feeling that Chico described. He said that this emotion is not weakness, it is remembrance. It is the soul recalling the comfort of absolute love that dwells on the other side. When this longing awakens, the spirit begins to change. Human ambitions lose their meaning, pride dissolves, and a sincere desire to live in truth is born. And it is at this point that the seventh sign emerges: inner purification. This purification is not done through rituals or penances, but through confrontations with one's own heart. Suddenly, everything that is false begins to bother. Small lies, social disguises, automatic attitudes. Nothing seems to fit anymore. The soul demands coherence, and the spirit begins to align thought, word, and action. Chico said that this is the moment when heaven begins to cleanse the inner temple. The human being feels a deep need to be true, even if it brings discomfort. It is the fire of conscience burning away the masks. What if the truth you fear to admit is the beginning of your liberation? What if recognizing your own shadows is the step that brings you closer to the light? Chico explained that, in higher planes, there is no way to hide what one is. There, thoughts are visible, intentions are vibrations, and transparency is natural. Therefore, the purification process begins here on Earth, while we can still choose. He called this process vibrational purification, and said that the spirit preparing for higher planes needs to learn to vibrate in truth. Love that does not lie is the love that survives death. This process, however, can be painful. The truths that liberate also wound. Suddenly, relationships crumble, paths unravel, old habits become unbearable. Life seems to fall apart piece by piece, as if everything were being rebuilt from scratch. Chico experienced this many times. Friends drifted away, his health faltered, but amidst the losses he would say, "When God is silent, he is shaping the soul." It is in this silence that the spirit learns the value of integrity. Pain, then, ceases to be punishment and becomes purification. The soul, now lighter, approaches a vibration where suffering finds no abode. But something extraordinary happens when the soul undergoes this inner cleansing. External reality begins to reorganize itself. Coincidences multiply, new people appear, doors open where there were once walls. Chico affirmed that life responds to the vibration of the spirit. When we change inside, the universe changes outside. It's as if an invisible gear aligns itself. He said that nothing is static, everything is energy in motion. And when the vibration of truth stabilizes within us, the material world begins to mirror this state. Have you ever noticed how, after a moment of deep pain, an unlikely sequence of good things often happens? As if life itself recognizes that you have passed a test and are now ready for something new? Chico saw this as a spiritual law. Purification opens up space, and where there is space, the divine enters. But most people fear this emptiness and try to fill it with distractions. However, it is precisely the emptiness that precedes the miracle. There are surprising accounts of this. In one of his letters, Chico recounted that, after losing a dear friend, he lived through days of utter desolation. He felt the silence as a weight, the loneliness as a wound. Then, one early morning while praying, he felt a luminous presence. It was his friend himself, smiling, saying, "Nothing is over, it has only begun in a different way." This phrase changed his life. He understood that the emptiness was not absence, but transition. The space left by the pain was the same space through which spiritual presence could enter. From then on, he said that every loss is an invitation to broaden one's perception of life. What if the pain you feel today is just a channel for the invisible to manifest? What if what seems like an end is actually a passage? The soul that learns to see this way never feels alone again. It begins to live accompanied by subtle presences, invisible friends, mentors, guides, who work silently around it. Chico said that we all have this company, but only those who have purified their hearts enough can perceive it. Truth attracts truth, and light recognizes light. When this state of consciousness takes hold, life gains a different brilliance. Not because everything improves, but because everything transforms into learning. The purified soul does not complain about destiny, it dialogues with it. The spirit learns to hear the signs, to interpret what it previously called chance, and to act with discernment. Chico said that the truly wise person is not the one who knows a lot, but the one who observes in silence until understanding the hidden meaning of things. But there is a decisive moment in this journey, when the already purified soul begins to realize that certain things inevitably say goodbye. People leave, cycles end, and a new kind of longing arises. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that prepares. It is the prelude to the 8th sign, when life reorganizes itself under higher laws. In this phase, the spirit learns that everything that falls apart does so out of love, and it is there that detachment transforms into total trust. Chico said that whoever understands the hidden order behind the chaos no longer fears the future, because they know that every ending is also a portal. But before the portal opens, there is always one last test. The soul is placed before that which it most fears losing. It's as if the universe were asking, "Do you truly trust?" And it is in this silent answer that the course of evolution is defined. Chico went through this countless times. He had to let go of people, places, dreams. In each farewell, he felt the same shiver, pain and faith walking side by side. But soon after, something miraculous happened. Peace returned, multiplied, and it is at this point, when the heart has already learned to trust even in the dark, that the soul comes into harmony with the divine will. Nothing needs to be forced anymore. Everything flows. What should remain, remains. What needs to leave, leaves gently. And life, obeying a greater wisdom, begins to rearrange itself. This is the prelude to the 8th and final sign, the moment when the entire universe reorganizes itself around a soul that finally remembers who it is. There are moments when the soul, after so much searching, so much pain, and so many revelations, finally understands the meaning of its path. It's as if the entire journey lived up to this point. The dreams, the losses, the reunions, the signs, and the purifications come together at a point of perfect clarity. Chico Xavier said that life is a school, and death, a graduation. But before departing for higher planes, the spirit is invited to apply what it has learned while still walking among the living. This is the true purpose of awakening in life, to transform understanding into action, faith into deed, light into service. Spiritual awakening is not a refuge to escape the world, but a new way of being in it, more conscious, more serene, and profoundly human. The 8th sign is precisely this moment of synthesis, when the soul, in silence, perceives that everything around it begins to reorganize itself. Relationships that seemed lost are resolved, paths previously blocked open, old pains lose their weight. Life, guided by an invisible intelligence, realigns itself according to the new vibratory state of the spirit. Chico said that when the soul harmonizes with the divine, the entire universe conspires in its direction. It's as if a sacred gear begins to turn, guiding each event to its proper place. And in this movement, the spirit understands that there was never any chance. Everything was preparation. The falls taught humility. The delays taught patience. The losses taught true love. Nothing was wasted. Everything was a lesson. But understanding this is not enough. It is necessary to live this awareness. Spiritual learning is only complete when it becomes practice. And Chico was always an example of this. Even tired, sick, exhausted, he continued helping, listening, writing. When asked where so much strength came from, he answered, "From the love I receive and that I need to give back." He believed that serving was the highest prayer, the most transformative, and that is exactly the practical application of awakening, transforming the love we receive into concrete acts of kindness. When we help someone, when we listen without judging, when we forgive, when we console, the light of the Spirit becomes action, and the world begins to change through us. Perhaps spiritual transformation doesn't begin with grand acts, but with small daily choices, in how we treat those who disagree with us, in how we react to anger, in how we respond to ingratitude. Chico said that the true disciple of Jesus is the one who plants serenity where there is turmoil. Each gesture of patience is a seed of light, and these seeds, multiplied over time, become the invisible gardens of good. He believed that the earth will become a more harmonious place not because of religions, but because of the silent hearts that practice love without needing to announce it. True good is discreet. It doesn't shout, but it transforms. What if you could be one of those hearts? What if the simple fact of hearing these words was already a sign that your time to act has come? Awakening doesn't happen by chance. If this message has reached you, it's because something in your soul asked for it. Perhaps you've recently felt a different kind of restlessness, a feeling that you need to do something bigger, something more meaningful. That's the call of the Spirit. The same Spirit that guided Chico now whispers within you. The difference is that, this time, you are the instrument. The world needs awakened people. It needs people who transform faith into action, compassion into attitude, spirituality into a living presence. But the soul upon awakening also faces the ultimate challenge: to live spiritual truth amidst the noise of the world, to maintain serenity when everything seems to collapse, to love when the heart wants to close, to believe when there are no signs. It is in these moments that faith ceases to be just words and becomes strength. Chico said that faith is the fuel of the impossible, and that only unwavering trust in divine goodness is capable of sustaining the soul in dark days. He reminded us that even Christ wept, but never gave up on love. This is the courage that the awakened spirit needs to cultivate, the courage to remain luminous, even when no one sees. There comes a point when the soul, after so much learning and service, discovers that it doesn't need proof. It feels the divine presence in everything, in the wind that touches its face, in the gaze of a stranger, in the silence that precedes dawn. Life becomes continuous prayer. The spirit understands that God is not in a distant place but pulsating within each instant. This perception changes everything. The simplest work transforms into an expression of love. Routine ceases to be repetition and becomes ritual. Every gesture, however small, gains a sacred meaning. It is in this state of consciousness that the human being approaches fullness, not because they have reached heaven, but because they have learned to recognize Him here. And then the fear of death, the one that always dwelt in the depths of the mind, begins to dissolve. The soul realizes that dying is merely crossing a threshold. The body bids farewell, but consciousness continues. Chico said that the spirit is like the wind. It may change direction, but it never stops blowing. Death is simply a change in the form of life. Knowing this is not escaping reality, but embracing it with gratitude. When we understand that we are eternal, we begin to live more lightly. We begin to forgive more quickly, to love more intensely, to value the present moment as the greatest gift that exists. True awakening lies not in seeking the afterlife, but in living the here and now with wisdom. What if death were not the end, but the beginning of a new way of existing? What if each life were a chapter in a book that the Spirit itself writes, page by page, until it fully understands love? This vision is not consolation, it is responsibility. Because if life continues, everything we do matters, every word, every choice, every silence. Chico believed that heaven begins where consciousness awakens. What we take with us, he said, is the love we gave, the peace we spread, the hope we left behind, nothing more. Therefore, to live well is to prepare to depart in peace at any moment, without regrets, with a clean and grateful heart. Perhaps this is the final invitation of this video, to live in such a way that, when your last day arrives, you can smile and say, as Chico Buarque used to say, "I fulfilled what I came to do." This doesn't mean having done everything right, but having loved enough. Love is the verb that summarizes the entire spiritual journey. To love life as it is, people as they are, destiny as it unfolds. Love is the point where all the laws of the universe meet. It is the thread that unites the visible and invisible worlds. And when the heart learns to love without fear, it becomes eternal. You don't need to wait for grand signs to begin. It can be now. Choose someone to forgive. Perform an act of kindness without expecting anything in return. Be silent before judging. Give thanks even for what you don't yet understand. These are the first steps of an awakened soul. Chico said that goodness is a light that never goes out, and that every loving gesture ignites a flame that even time cannot extinguish. Imagine how many lives can be touched by a simple gesture of yours. Imagine how many souls can find solace through your words, your patience, your example. And so, when the cycle of life is complete, you will not depart in fear but in peace, because you will understand, as Chico understood, that no one dies. They only change address. The soul continues to live, conscious, loving, And the seeds you plant now will blossom in dimensions your eyes cannot yet see. All that is true never disappears. All that is love remains. If these words touched you, if they somehow awakened memories or brought comfort, let your heart speak. Write in the comments what you felt, even if it's just one word. If you prefer, comment anonymously. The important thing is to record what your soul experienced in this moment. Each message here becomes a beacon, guiding other souls seeking meaning. And if you wish to continue receiving messages that uplift the spirit and strengthen faith, subscribe to the channel now and activate the notification bell. Each video is a new opportunity to remember who you truly are. Like, comment, share. But above all, live. Live consciously with love and gratitude. Because awakening is not a destination, it's a state of presence. And starting today, it can begin within you.